October 1944, France, a field outside Metz. Private Kowalski couldn't sleep. It wasn't unusual. A lot of men couldn't sleep in October 1944. The fighting had been heavy. The ground was cold. The nights were long. Kowalski got up at 200 and walked the perimeter. Not because he was ordered to. Just to move. Just to be somewhere other than inside his own head. That's when he saw the figure in the field. A single man working alone in the dark, moving slowly, deliberately. Kowalski raised his rifle, called out. The figure stopped and turned. It was Father Thomas Brennan, the regiment's chaplain, 51 years old. From a small parish in Philadelphia before the war. He had been serving with the regiment for 18 months. He was holding a shovel. Around him in the field, marked with small wooden crosses, were graves. Some of them fresh, some of them not. Kowalski lowered his rifle. He walked closer. He looked at the crosses. Some of them had American names, some of them had German names. He stood there for a long moment. Then he walked back to camp, lay down on his bedroll and stared at the canvas above him until morning. At 0600 he filed a report. By that afternoon it was on Patton's desk. This is what happened when Patton asked Father Brennan to explain himself. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show what men carried when nobody was watching. Father Thomas Brennan had been a parish priest for 19 years before the army found him. He had buried parishioners. He had buried children. He had buried old men who had lived full lives and young men who hadn't. He believed with a completeness that was not complicated for him, that the dead deserved burial, not because of what they had done in life, not because of which side they had fought on, because they were human beings, and human beings deserved to be returned to the earth with dignity. This belief had not created problems for him in 19 years of parish work. It had created a problem now. The problem was not that he buried American soldiers. That was his job. That was what chaplains did. The problem was what he did after. When the fighting moved through an area and left its dead behind, Brennan would return at night. He would find the enemy soldiers who had been left where they fell, not buried, not marked, just left. And he would bury them too. He had been doing this for 6 months quietly, without orders, without telling anyone. He used his own time, his own back, his own shovel. He made small crosses from whatever wood he could find. He wrote names on them when he could find identification. When he couldn't, he wrote what he knew, the date, the location, a prayer. Kowalski had found him in the middle of his 40th such burial. Major William Cross was assigned to take the preliminary statement. He sat across from Brennan in a field tent the following morning. He said, "Did you know this was unauthorized?" Brennan said yes. Cross said, "Did you know it could be seen as giving comfort to the enemy?" Brennan looked at him. He said, "They're dead, Major. The dead don't receive comfort." Cross said, "Some of our men might see it differently. Seeing their chaplain treating enemy graves the same as American graves." Brennan said, "I understand that. I'm not asking the men to feel the same way I do. I'm asking them to let me do what I do in the middle of the night when nobody has to see it." Cross wrote all of this down. Then he sent the report to Patton. Patton read the report that afternoon. He read it once and set it down. Then he picked it up and read it again. His aide Davenport was standing nearby. He said nothing. He had learned by this point in the war to read the quality of Patton's silences. This was not an angry silence. This was a thinking silence with something else in it. Something Davenport didn't see often enough to have a name for. Patton set the report down. He said, "Get me Brennan, not through the chaplain corps. Directly." Brennan arrived the following morning. He was a small man, unremarkable looking with the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades listening to people in their worst moments and had learned not to fill silence with noise. He sat down across from Patton without being asked. Patton looked at him. He said, "How many?" Brennan said, 43, as of last night. Patton said, "How many American?" Brennan said, 21. The others are enemy soldiers. Patton said, "You've been doing this for 6 months." Brennan said, "Yes, sir." Patton said, "Without orders?" Brennan said, "Yes, sir." Patton said, "Why?" Brennan said, "Because they weren't being buried, because men were being left in fields, because that is not something I can observe and do nothing about." Patton said, "They're enemy soldiers." Brennan said, "They're dead men." Patton said, "Some of my soldiers would say there's a difference." Brennan said, "I know they would. I'm not trying to change what your soldiers feel. I'm not trying to make a statement. I go out at 0200 when nobody is there and I do what I do and I come back." Patton said, "And if a soldier sees you, if word spreads that the regimental chaplain treats enemy graves the same as American graves?" Brennan said, "Then they'll think what they think. I can't control that. I can control what I do in a field at 0200. Patton looked at him for a long time. He said, "Tell me why it matters. Not theologically, to you personally. Why does it matter that an enemy soldier who tried to kill your men gets a cross in the ground?" Brennan was quiet for a moment. Not because he didn't know, because he was deciding how to say it in a way that was honest rather than polished. He said, "I have buried 21 American soldiers since this regiment arrived in France. I knew some of them. I sat with some of them before they died. I said words over all of them and meant every word." He paused. He said, "Every one of those men had a mother. Every one of them was someone's son. Every one of them went out into a field and faced something terrifying, and most of them were afraid, and all of them died." He said the men across the wire were also someone's sons. They were also afraid. They also died in fields far from home. The fact that they were on the other side of the wire doesn't change any of those things. It changes what I was allowed to do about it while they were alive. It doesn't change what I can do now that they're dead." The room was quiet. He said, "When I stand over a grave, I'm not making a political statement. I'm not saying their cause was right or their country was good or that what they did was justified. I'm saying that a human being died here and someone should mark it, that's all. That's the whole of it." Patton said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Major Cross thinks some of the men might interpret this as a lack of distinction between the sides." Brennan said, "With respect, sir, Major Cross isn't out there at 0200. The men aren't out there at 0200. I'm out there at 0200. The only lack of distinction I'm making is in how much darkness a dead man deserves to be left in." Patton stood up. He walked to the window. The October fields outside, gray and cold. He stood there for a while. He turned back around. He said, "I'm not going to order you to stop. I want to be clear that this is not an endorsement of what you're doing. It is not an official position of this army." Brennan said, "I understand, sir." Patton said, "What you do at 0200 in a field is between you and whoever you think is watching." Brennan said, "Yes, sir." Patton said, "But I want one thing from you." Brennan waited. Patton said, "When you mark one of ours, you mark it properly. Name, rank, unit, date, everything. I want the families to have what they're owed." Brennan said, "I've been doing that from the beginning, sir." Patton said, "I know. I read the report." He sat back down. He said, "One more thing. If any of my men give you trouble about this, if anyone confronts you, threatens you, makes your work harder, you come to me directly." Brennan said, "Sir, I don't expect..." Patton said, "I know you don't expect it. I'm telling you anyway. You come to me directly." Brennan nodded. He said, "Yes, sir." He stood to leave. Patton said, "Father." Brennan turned. Patton said, "How do you carry it? All of it. 21 American soldiers, 22 enemy soldiers. How does a man carry 43 graves and still get up at 0200 and dig a 44th? Brennan looked at him. The question was genuine. He could see that. He said, "The same way you do, General. You put it somewhere you can reach it when you need it, and you don't let it spill into the parts of the day that require you to function." He paused. He said, "The difference is I do my carrying in the dark, with a shovel. I find that helps." He walked out. Father Brennan continued until the regiment crossed into Germany in March 1945. By that point, he had buried 91 men, 44 American, 47 enemy. He kept a record, every name he could find, every date, every location. The record was a small notebook kept in his breast pocket, carried through France and Belgium and into Germany. After the war, he returned to his parish in Philadelphia. He brought the notebook with him. He spent 3 years after the war writing letters to families in Ohio and Georgia and California, telling them where their sons were buried, what the grave markers said, how to find them if they ever came back to look. He also wrote when he could find addresses to families in Germany. Fewer of those letters were answered. Some were returned unopened. A few came back with brief, careful replies. A mother's handwriting, a wife's handwriting, thanking the priest they had never heard of for the information he had kept. He kept every reply in the same file as the notebook. When he died in 1971, the notebook and the file were found together on his desk. He had been writing something the night before he died, a letter to a family in Bavaria about a grave marker he had set in October 1944. He had not finished it. His assistant completed it and sent it. Patton never mentioned the conversation publicly, but Davenport's journal, which described the afternoon Patton came back from the window and gave Brennan the unofficial permission, included one entry that the historian who later compiled Davenport's notes described as unlike anything else in 2 years of wartime observation. Davenport wrote, "After Brennan left, Patton sat at his desk for almost 10 minutes without moving. He was not reading. He was not writing. He was not looking at anything in the room. He was somewhere else, entirely. I have worked for this man for 2 years. I have watched him make decisions about the lives of hundreds of thousands of men with a speed and certainty that still astonishes me when I think about it. I have never seen him sit still for 10 minutes with nothing in his hands. Then he picked up a pen and wrote something on a piece of paper. Not a report, not an order, something short. He folded it once and put it in his jacket pocket. I never found out what it was. I never asked. There are things you don't ask. He said only one thing for the rest of that afternoon. He was looking out the window when he said it. He was not speaking to me. He was speaking to the fields outside, or to himself, or to no one. He said, "There are men in this army who are better than the war they're fighting. The only right thing to do is get out of their way." Then he picked up the next report and went back to work. I wrote that sentence down immediately because I knew I would need to keep it. I have thought about it many times since, in the context of the conversation that had just happened, in the context of the war, in the context of everything I watched that man do and fail to do and choose and refuse over 2 years. I think it might be the truest thing I ever heard him say. Not the most confident, not the most commanding, the truest. Would you have done what Father Brennan did? And would you have let him continue? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories, the ones about what men carried when nobody was watching, make sure you subscribe.